Welcome and thank you for attending my webinar today. We've got a great session planned with a little bit of marketing theory and a whole lot of practical marketing tips. This session is about how you can use email marketing and social media to grow your business or organization while complying with the Canadian anti-spam legislation. My name is Jennifer Hensel. I'm a platinum level solution provider and an authorized expert with Constant Contact. I've been with Constant Contact since 1999, making me one of the most experienced Constant Contact solution providers. I live in Vancouver in the Fraser Valley, BC, Canada area, but I have clients around the world. I've been selling online since the internet began, and I've written 2 books. My first book was about import-export called Import-Export Coach 20 Keys to Going Global. My background is as an international trade consultant with a focus on international marketing and how to make the right international contacts. And I created one of the top import-export business startup websites, importexportcoach.com, which still generates passive income for me today. In more recent years, I provide marketing and success coaching, and my second book is called 592 Tweets, Posts, and Quotes, Ideas for Your Social Media Content. I'm also the founder of Connect Now Business Network, where I provide a system for creating flourishing live meetups. With all that combined, I've created proven inbound and outbound marketing systems for myself and my clients. I know it's been a tough year for some, and the information we're going to cover in today's session should help you to start moving the needle in the right direction. We're here to talk about list building and legislation, yes? But we're also here to talk about the importance of relationships, because those names in your database aren't just names. They're customers, prospects, donors, members, or supporters, clients. They're the people that help make your business or organization what it is. With all the marketing options out there today, small business owners and nonprofit directors are looking for guidance in how to navigate all these choices and to be directed to the right tools that fit within their budget, that can be set up quite simply, tools that just work for them. People want and need marketing systems that work. Today, we're not only going to talk about growing your list as a simple set of tasks or tools you use, although we'll be doing that. We're going to talk about how you create the opportunity to add a name to your list, how that opportunity represents a commitment on your part, and how you then have to engage with your audience and deliver on the commitment. After we've talked about why it's important to grow your contact list, we'll talk about how to go about collecting names and some great tools that make it easy to do that. And then we're going to quickly review some of the common questions that we get about CASL, the Canadian anti-spam legislation. It's not only for those in Canada, it's for anyone in the world who wants to market anything to Canadians or Canadian businesses and organizations. In addition to these topics, we really want to drive home the point that the objective isn't simply about the list size. It's about growing your business or organization and recognizing that the list size represents the growth of your business, of the relationships that you're creating, and of the expanding footprint of your brand. Quality is always more important than quantity. Canada's anti-spam legislation is here. It took effect on July 1st, 2014. It has a broad sweeping impact on all organizations that use email marketing, mobile marketing, and other forms of digital communication. Since most organizations fall under this very large catch-all, it's important that everyone be aware of the law and actively incorporate the proper email practices. So let's kick off today with a quick summary of the legislation. Canada's anti-spam legislation is all about the rules for sending CEMs, commercial electronic messages. It's a standalone law, passed royal assent at the end of 2010, and applies to email marketing and social media marketing. In short, don't assume that your audiences want your marketing stuff. Get their permission first. There are a couple key points that need to be considered when it comes to CASL. If you're going to comply with the Canadian anti-spam legislation, then the primary consideration is around consent. What comprises consent and what type of consent is appropriate? The legislation talks about 2 types of consent, express and implied. Express. What is express consent under the legislation? Explicit permission electronically in writing or oral with documentation to a business or charity to send CEMs. Unlike implied consent, express consent has no time limit. That's why it's worth investing the time to acquire express consent from your contacts and customers. Once you have that permission, you can keep reaching out to your list through email, texting, and social media messages. It does not expire. One thing to note, if you're planning on using electronic forms under the new legislation, make sure you ask people to check off their permission. You cannot use a pre-checked box. That's a little different from the way many people were working, but fortunately Constant Contact offers that feature to make it easy for you. CASL also makes concession for implied consent. There are a few things that are considerations for implied consent. You have to have a pre-existing relationship, or the contact has to have published or given their address. A very important element of this type of consent is that implied consent under CASL has a time limit. So it's the worst kind of permission. So in today's session, we're going to be talking about getting express explicit consent. Why not get the best kind of permission right away? You might be thinking, why should we care? It seems like it's too difficult, and is the government really going to come after me, the small business owner? You should be aware that the legislation comes with some teeth. If you get caught not complying, you can open your organization up to fines of up to $10 million per infraction. So get permission. Now let me reassure you a little bit. As long as you can prove that you tried to comply, the legislation says that will be considered. So it means you need to get permission and then track where and what type you got. If you're going to request consent, you need to be careful about the wording. Make sure you are clear that someone is opting in to get your messages. Offering a free download, for example. Perhaps a photographer offers a guide, 7 tips to prepare for a family photo shoot. You need to make sure that people know when they give their email address to get that download that they are also going to be added to your email list. When you send out emails, there are a few things you need to do to make sure that you are CASL compliant. Include an option for people to get off your list, include a permission reminder, clearly indicate who is sending the message. Where this might be an issue is if you are a marketing agency or freelance consultant sending on behalf of a client, you need to indicate somewhere in the message that you are sending on their behalf. The last point about the Canadian anti-spam legislation I want to highlight is with respect to nonprofit or charitable organizations. Often people who work in these organizations say, well, we're not sending commercial messages, we're not for profit. But the truth is, under the legislation, the definition of commercial activity is any conduct that is of a commercial character, whether or not the activity is conducted for profit. For example, that newsletter that you send out talking about your activities, your events, your nonprofit causes, issues, and so on, a list of volunteer opportunities, all of those need to be CASL compliant. All electronic messages, whether for profit or not, are subject to the Canada anti-spam legislation. It's always best to email and communicate with people who have expressed that they want to hear from you, people who know your organization. And if you follow best practices, you can add people to your list who do not yet support you. So let's dive into those strategies. Now, some of you may be sitting here with a growing negative feeling in the bottom of your stomach as you face some of the facts of this legislation. I want to reassure you, there is really one main message that as an online marketer you need to focus on. What this legislation is enforcing is what successful online marketers have always known. I've been practicing these principles since I started using Constant Contact in 1999, and it has been an essential pillar in growing my business. This law is simply putting into place what is already considered proper business etiquette. If you market to people who want to hear from you, you will be more successful. So don't let this legislation scare you. The best practices of marketing have not changed. Getting opt-in permission contacts is key to growing any business. When I first went out to build my business, I quickly learned how important my contacts were. Over the years, I learned that when I stayed in touch with people and reminded them of my capabilities by sharing tips and advice in an email or calling once in a while, it led to more and more work. 10 years after I started my company, I was still doing work with clients I had in year 1. My strategies for building relationships and getting permission have been proven time and time again. When I go to a trade show, for example, I often get to know the vendors around me, and I stay in touch with them. I'm often surprised at how many businesses don't do much business after the show. Most of the time it's because they have no follow-up system in place, or at least one that doesn't really work well for them. It's too time-consuming for them, and they just put it on the back burner. But I always follow up immediately with my permission contacts, and I do lots of business after the shows. The only difference is in how I collect, manage, and follow up with the relationships and contacts I made there. I love the system I have in place. Many of the strategies I'm sharing with you today are at the core of how I grow my business. The idea of turning strangers into friends and then into repeat customers and referral engines for your business isn't new. Seth Godin noted that obtaining permission to market to your customers and supporters is critical to developing relationships. ones that become important and are missed if not maintained. Gail Goodman, CEO of Constant Contact, talked about the importance of leveraging a great customer experience in your store, one of your events, and so on, and turning it into the foundation for a great relationship, and for asking the customer or supporter to allow you to stay in touch through email in exchange for something of value.